There we go, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of The Rational Standard. I am Martin van Staden, joined as usual by David Ansara and one of our very special guests, Leigh-Ann Hallak, who we've had on a few times. But it's appropriate for her to be on today because I know the issues we're discussing are very kind of close to her heart. And what else would it be that we're talking about this week? I think everyone who follows the rational standard knows exactly what's coming. And that is, of course, the Rambo cowboy, gun toting MP, and overzealous user of his firearm, according to the establishment in South Africa by the name of Ian Cameron, who, let me just bring my screen in here, up here. Um, Vincent Kreyvagen of Daily Maverick reports on the incident that Ian Cameron ran into with his colleagues in Philippi being attacked. And he says that there was some believe he was overzealous in the use of his firearm. And where is that beautiful? Yes, the assailants reportedly used bricks, but they were unarmed, and I find this to be a very interesting way to kind of characterize the situation. It's and I'm not joking when I say that this would be just as well if you said the assailants reportedly had assault rifles but were unarmed. A brick is an arm; it's a weapon. A spoon is a weapon. A blanket could be a weapon if you're using it to attack someone. So no, they weren't unarmed. But not to be outdone, um, Daily Maverick I think was first to the party. Good. The political party of Patricia DeLille said that Ian Cameron is a gun-toting MP. And where is that? Somewhere near the end here. They might have actually changed some of the. Oh, no, here it is. A latter-day Rambo or Pitre is what Ian Cameron is. I don't know how poor old Pitre was brought into this. I get the Rambo reference, but this is a little bit interesting. But the take from Good and specifically Brett Herron, the Secretary General, is effectively that Ian Cameron should have sat quietly in the car and allowed him and his colleagues to be killed. Not for any kind of general reason, but only because the assailants were black. Now, I don't know if the assailants were black. Brett Herron says the assailants were black, but because they were black, the victims of this crime should have just sat pretty and waited for the poor old assailants to finish what they started. So I'm gonna throw it to you, Leigh-Ann. I know how fired up you rightfully get about nonsense like this. um, what is your take on this? I don't know. Maybe give listeners. I know you've followed the kind of details and facts around the case a little bit more closely than I have. Maybe just take listeners a little bit through what happened exactly, according to the information. How did Ian Cameron respond, and what kind of our media is pretending to kind of be journalists on once again and failing. So over to you, Leigh-Ann.
So, in a nutshell, it was Ian Cameron, his colleagues Lisa Marie Schikkerling and Nicholas Gotzel. They were actually coming back from a oversight visit to the Philippi SAPS Training College. On their way back, these guys attacked them with bricks. The windows were completely shuttered. I've seen the photos; you can barely see through them. Ian was struck in the face, in his mouth. He's got a few broken teeth that he had to go and sort out at the dentist, and he had to get stitches to his face. It doesn't sound to me that Lisa was really injured, but unfortunately, Nicholas Gotzel, he took a brick to the head and had quite a severe wound, which landed him in hospital. So he was in the vehicle bleeding when all this went down, and Ian fired one shot at one of the guys. As far as I understand, two of them who were arrested, the one is 17, the other is 18, and the other one they haven't managed to arrest yet. So that's basically what happened. They were in traffic at the time, so they couldn't move. They were boxed in by other vehicles. So yeah, that's basically what happened. The the comments by the media, I'm not surprised, to be honest, because in South Africa there's this strange idea that if someone is poorer, younger, or blacker, you are not allowed to defend yourself. They can do anything to you, and you have to accept it. They can take your property if they want to. They can assault you, which is just absolutely ridiculous. And just coming back to Daily Maverick, because that's basically where it started, right? The Daily Mavericks expert, who is not named, by the way, which Martin heard from MJ attorneys rightfully responded to them, saying that if your expert is not named, he most likely doesn't exist or he's not an expert, which is very clear because this expert didn't even take the time to Google before responding to some of these claims. So just to come back to the brick not being a weapon, the Dangerous Weapons Act says an object, even if not originally designed as a weapon, can be considered a dangerous weapon if it is capable of causing death or inflicting serious bodily harm. So a brick is absolutely a dangerous weapon. I don't know where they got this from.
I mean, it's to me, it's our fiery but mostly peaceful moment. If you get that reference from the U.S., it's like, oh no, they were just hurling bricks at these people and kind of one person's head was kind of gashed open and the other one lost some of his teeth, but they were unarmed. No, it's fine.
Yes.
Yeah, it's I always want to say it leaves me speechless, but I actually do have a hell of a lot to say. David, any thoughts from your side on this absolute clown show?
Yeah, Martin, I've never known you to be speechless. I'm still waiting for the day where you have no words. But yeah, I think this was a really interesting example of how media distortions operate, right? I mean, here you have what I think is a fairly straightforward case. These members of parliament were exercising their duties, doing this oversight visit to the police station in Philippi. You know, they got attacked. They defended themselves legitimately against actual violence. It wasn't the threat of violence or just vibes or something. It was they literally sustained head wounds. And you know, I would salute Ian Cameron for doing what he did. He acted in legitimate self-defense. He used appropriate force. I saw somewhere somebody saying, "Oh, Ian should have fired a warning shot into the air to ward off the criminals." But my understanding is that that's not a legal thing to do. If you do that, you're potentially endangering the lives of other people. So yeah, you know, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around basic firearms law, and you know, I think it's perfectly understandable and legitimate that somebody in Ian's position would have to bear arms. I mean, we live in an incredibly violent society, as was demonstrated by this incident, and you know, I think it actually shows the importance of small arms as a way of dealing with rampant criminality. The South African Police Service, as Ian points out, almost every time he's in a portfolio committee of Parliament, the police service is overstretched, undercapacitated, poorly managed. Ian will tell you that there are a number of hardworking, diligent cops out there who, you know, are trying their best to stem the tide of rising criminality, but they can't do it on their own. That's why private security is so important, but also individual citizens, well trained, well armed, disciplined in the use of their firearms. And yeah, I think if this is not a legitimate example of when armed force should be used, then I don't know what is. And yeah, I mean, the thing with the brick is absolute folly. They were definitely armed. Martin, who's momentarily disappeared from the stream, I think he tweeted yesterday or posted on X that even if you're carrying a spoon and you're trying to attack somebody with a spoon, that is a form of arms. You're trying to inflict violence on that person. So yeah, I think this is just a very weird kind of gaslighting sort of exercise. We maybe overuse that term, gaslighting, on this podcast, but that's what it seems to me to be in this instance.
It's completely bizarre, David. It doesn't make any sense. The question that I still have for all of them, Brett Heron, Kaya FM, and Daily Maverick, is what exactly did they expect Ian to do? Do they have a solution? What should he have done in that instance where someone is attacking you with a brick? Was he supposed to just stand there? None of them have an answer to that question.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I think also if you browse through that press statement by Good, they're talking about all of the structural injustices, apartheid spatial planning and inequality, and how some areas are poorly served by the police and so on. All of those you could make legitimate arguments about. But ultimately, what it does is it diminishes the agency of the individual perpetrators responsible for those crimes. It says, well, look, you're just a victim of history. You happen to be this poor young black person living in a township, and therefore you are exonerated of any criminality or criminal intent. And I think that that's quite dangerous. And then, so not only do you diminish the individual agency of the perpetrator and their responsibility for their actions, but then you also simultaneously take away the agency of the victim to be able to legitimately defend their life from violent attack. So, I think I don't want to get too philosophical about this because the whole thing is just ridiculous. But it kind of shows you the difference in thinking between people who think in terms of groups or collectives or kind of structural class strata versus the way that we like to think about things as in terms of individuals who have rights but also responsibilities. Martin, one of 44 in the comments asked if you'd been Stalined, but it seems that you've been resurrected. We've had a de-Stalinization campaign.
The Hawks have not yet come for me. No, they've come for AfriForum and they've come for Anton Taylor, but I am still amongst the free. Yeah, sorry about that. I had some audio issues. But yeah, I caught the end there of what you were saying, David. It's absolutely a denial of agency. I mean, it's and it's the fact that it's done so unconsciously is what gets me. That someone like Brett Heron could be kind of insert himself, kind of interpose into this situation and be like, these are just really misunderstood youths, and nothing. They didn't really mean anything by it, and it's actually kind of what he implies is that things are so bad in the Western Cape, and this is really an understandable reaction. I mean, that is such a disgusting denial of agency. It's these are criminals, and this is what Ian did was absolutely the correct response that South Africa should have to this kind of unrestrained criminality, this kind of casualness with which people attack each other. And yeah, I think kudos to Ian Cameron. This is absolutely the right thing to do. And what I was saying before the stream, and I don't know if you two kind of dealt with this, but if the other options that were laid out were taken, the reaction wouldn't be any better. If so, Brett Heron says that actually they should have asked for security from the Speaker of Parliament to accompany them. And the other thing is, as I said, kind of this implication that the DA run Western Cape, DA run Cape Town, has to do more to fight crime. Now, just imagine if Ian Cameron does his visits to police stations around kind of Cape Town and around the Western Cape, and he takes no security with him to Worcester or to Atlantis or whatever. But now he goes to Philippi, and now he's kind of surrounded with these kind of big security guards. And Brett Heron sees that. Do you think he's just going to say, "Oh no, it's fine"? No, 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 no. It's going to be like, "This is racist." I
Blue
mean,
light
he's going
brigade.
into yes, yeah, he's going into Mitchell's plane. Now he needs security. What are you trying to tell us?
He doesn't take his security detail with him to Camps Bay when he goes for a cocktail sundowner.
Exactly. Yeah, but now Heron says no, no. They should have rather asked for more security. And if there were probably a bunch of armed security guards around, there would have probably been a dead guy in this story. So that's the other thing. And imagine, which I think is a good idea, but imagine if the DA kind of blanketed Philippi and the Mitchell, kind of the Cape Flats, which is, as I've often said here on the pod, one of the most violent places on the continent. With the Cape Flats, if the DA blanketed it with police and said, "Okay, cool, Brett, we're gonna secure the Cape Flats now because that's what you want," would he think that's the right response? Of course not. Of course not. So this is one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't situations. And you really should be very careful about engaging with people like Brett, kind of trying to, oh, it's a misunderstanding and so on. No, it's very much a what the American right very annoyingly sometimes refers to as a psyop. It's a psychological operation. He's not actually making a point here. This is about destabilizing normality, is what these leftists would kind of characterize it as, because everything that has happened is normal. When someone attacks you and your colleagues, you do get to shoot them, especially when they're armed, and they were armed. But no, that's somehow kind of improper. So yeah, complete denial of agency, and luckily, I think on other issues, South Africans have trouble kind of coming together. But it seems like on firearm rights and the right to self-defense, South Africans across racial and gender and kind of community lines actually are of one mind, and that's always given me quite a bit of hope. That this kind of nonsense is actually kind of seen for what it is.
Yeah, I mean, also we need to ask some pretty difficult questions of South Africa as a society, because yes, it's a very unequal country. Yes, we have lots of poverty. By the way, all of those bad things are caused by the poor policy framework that we have. Or inequality per se is not in and of itself a bad thing, but we have a kind of a rarefied elite that benefits from its proximity to state power, that benefits economically as well because of that. But I mean, if you consider Africa as a continent, South Africa, relative to other African countries, is more prosperous in GDP per capita terms and in absolute GDP terms than most countries. But it also is more violent than many other African countries, barring the ones that are engaged in active civil war. So why is that? You know, why, if you had to go to Malawi, would you not experience the same levels of violent criminality, even though people are much more worse off in that country than in South Africa? So, yeah, you know, I think a lot of the kind of structural sociological arguments don't really wash, actually. I think we have a problem with violence, and it's a difficult thing to understand. I'm not a criminologist, but I think a lot of it is weakened state capacity and a lack of prioritization of dealing with violent crime. But I think there's maybe also something wrong in our communities at the grassroots level, where, you know, rampant gangsterism, for example, is allowed to flourish. Those are complex drivers there. But yeah, I mean, also, I think a lot of this psyop that you are observing here, Martin, is there's some tinges of social justice theory to it as well, in the sense of, well, there's this matrix and a hierarchy of victimhood, and, you know, there's certain people who are at the top of the power matrix, white heterosexual males, like Ian Cameron, and, you know, they're protected by their power and their privilege, and so it's kind of legitimate when somebody lower down the pecking order takes a brick and tries to correct the historical injustices.
Punching up,
and
they would call
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, it's just kind of very ugly and very cynical. I mean, I think Brett Herron is probably one of the most cynical politicians in South Africa. And yeah, there's quite a lot of competition in that space in terms of cynicism. And yeah, I also saw, just as a brief sidebar, that Bosa, I think it was Bosa and Rise Mzansi and Good are in discussions with each other about forming a new centrist party. I don't know. The term centrist is quite a nebulous one, often misused. But I wouldn't classify those parties as centrist. So maybe that means they're not, they're just hard leftists. They're not kind of foaming at the mouth leftists. But yeah, I would caution Rise Mzansi and Bosa about getting into bed with those chaps at Good, because they, I think, are quite a devious bunch.
No, absolutely. I actually have a positive reaction to the idea of them all merging, because I do think having a home for extremist leftists, but who are of the kind of what would we call it, Bishop's Court, Southern Suburbs kind of sort. I think that's useful, so that everyone knows how our politics works. It's like, okay, I'm an extreme leftist, but I like sipping my wine on the veranda kind of every afternoon, and kind of being in polite company. So I'll join this thing there, because currently those people tend to end up in the DA, which causes me a lot of despondency, I would say, about our politics. But Leigh-Ann, I think you actually viewed more media than maybe David and I did. We've seen the Daily Maverick. I don't know if you and David discussed this, but there was a radio discussion as well about what happened with Ian. Did they fare any better kind of on kind of dissecting what happened, and were they a little bit more kind of up to date with the law and how self-defense works?
Oh my gosh. I'm ever so sorry that I took time out of my day to listen to this. But I find it quite amusing, because this is our media, right? This is not some other podcaster just randomly. This is establishment media, right? A radio station. It was on Kaya FM. So the one take which I found was particularly funny was from one of the hosts, Mpho. She said that perhaps Ian was just having a bad day, and he was maybe a bit frustrated with the country when he decided to shoot someone. Now, I mean, this is so far from reality. That was quite shocking to me, that someone would make such an assertion. The other thing is, they refer to the incident as a kerfuffle. Not a violent ambush. It was just a kerfuffle. They thought it was very important to make fun of the fact that he still had blood on his face, which was apparently very amusing to the hosts, because he's trying to be dramatic by still having blood on his face, which is actually quite disgusting. And a lot of the stuff that, obviously, they had read the Daily Maverick article where this expert said that a brick is not a dangerous weapon, and the issue with the warning shot. They said he should have shot a warning shot. Now, just for everyone listening, a warning shot is illegal. It is against the law. You put other people in danger when you're firing warning shots. It's real life. It's not GTA. So what actually alarms me is that these are people in our media, and specifically these types of people that they want you crucified for spreading what they call disinformation, yet they disseminate so much of it, and it's dangerous. Clearly nobody read the law. They just went onto this radio show and spewed this garbage. Save yourself the 15 minutes and don't listen to it.
Yeah, I mean, look, the warning shot thing is it's Hollywoodism. Like
Yes.
it's insane how it kind of catches on. Like there in the movies you hear about warning shots, and therefore now warning shots are a thing. But no, I mean, this is I wouldn't want to say it's a well-known fact, but I mean, if you shoot into the ground, the bullet can ricochet. If you shoot into the air, this is what Malema has been in court for now for a while. That is dangerous. The bullets do come down. You're gonna kill someone if you shoot a warning shot. There's no such thing as a warning shot. Like if you draw your weapon, you should aim it where you're gonna use it, and you should be prepared to use it lawfully. So
Correct.
yeah, it's these are a bunch of I mean, do DJs count as journalists? I mean, maybe we should give them the benefit of the doubt and say, well, they're not journalists, they're entertainers, so maybe this is entertaining to them. But yeah, it's kind of a kerfuffle. Seriously, I mean, again, bringing up the a fiery but mostly peaceful kind of protest thing from the U.S. Um, and the bad day thing, like yeah, maybe he had bad breakfast that morning, and therefore he decided he's going to go and shoot up kind of a bunch of peaceful civilians. This impression that is created by people who truly are thought leaders, like I'm sure there's hundreds, maybe thousands of people who listen to these hosts and they put currency in what they say, like what these hosts on these radio shows say. It's something that people take seriously, and now they have this thing in their mind of some DA MP who kind of arms himself in the morning and he has a bad day and now he's going to go and shoot people. So no, it's when people say the media has a responsibility, like that's not just a dismissive notion. No, the media does have a responsibility to be factual. I know that's kind of a throwaway line because partiality is so normal, but don't be casual with important stuff like this, which is clearly kind of available in spades right now with this very serious incident that occurred out nearby to a police station. I mean,
Mm.
attacking high ranking government officials. So very very worrying.
Well, they
Look,
even competed to sorry, David,
okay.
they even competed to the Oscar Pistorius defense, which yeah, shooting someone through a bathroom door and shooting someone who's wielding a brick at your head is apparently the same.
No way.
Yeah, and it's not even that the
Jeez.
brick was wielded. The brick connected with two heads.
Yes.
I mean, like
Exactly.
you're
But you know,
beyond the point of assumptions or implications or innuendos. This is actual violence being inflicted on you. Yeah, look, I wouldn't get my news from DJs. I prefer to get my news from comedians on YouTube. That have more authority. But yeah, I mean, I think if you just think about this, right? If you were going into Philippi or some other rather dangerous place, who would you rather have by your side? Ian Cameron or Brett Herron? I'll leave that up to you
It's a tough
to
one. Jeez.
contemplate.
well, Brett
But you
Heron can
need,
defend us with his economic development plan.
Yes. It's like
yeah,
a
but
thick shield. Yeah.
the point is like actually, you know, when I was growing up, I always used to look at guns with a lot of suspicion because I thought, you know, what are these tough guys doing? You know, wielding their gun, and you know, this is a dangerous weapon, and guns are used to kill people. But you know, I think part of growing up is you realize that actually, first of all, that force is going to be used in a society one way or another, and the state itself is underpinned by the supposedly legitimate concentration, monopoly of violent force. Like if you don't pay your taxes, you're going to get a summons to the court. If you refuse to go to the court, they're going to come and lock you up. You know, and that is coercive capability. You know, if you refuse arrest, they're gonna force you into the back of that van. And I really think actually gun ownership is a sign of deep responsibility towards not only protecting your own life and liberty, but also your family, your neighborhood, your community. I mean, there are a lot of people in our cities in the suburbs or in some of the towns around South Africa who volunteer their time to work with community policing forums. They work, and I think Ian is a good example of this. Before he got into politics, he was very much on the ground organizing through Action Society, some of these kind of ground up initiatives. And in the absence of a capable state, it's incumbent on communities to take responsibility for many of these functions traditionally delegated to the state. And yeah, that might be an onerous burden on your time and your energy, and also could expose you to risks. But that is a responsible thing to do if you care about the safety and the security of your loved ones and of your fellow community members. So actually, gun ownership, when you apply for a license, I mean, maybe we can argue and criticize that it's very difficult and onerous to get a license, but there's a reason you're getting that license, because you need to demonstrate competency. You need to show that you're properly trained, that you're going to use that weapon in a diligent, restrained way. But ultimately, you carry that firearm because if things really come down to it, you need to be able to defend yourself. And, that is a very important tool in the defense of liberty. And that's why I think we would be very much in support of wider gun ownership. And there's a philosophical political theory dimension to this as well, that actually you don't want to cede all coercive power to the state, like in other supposedly gun-free societies, like in the United Kingdom. I mean, you can't always trust that your elected representatives are going to use their power in a restrained way. Look at all of the infringements on speech and some of the social issues that have been arising in the United Kingdom. And look at what happened during the COVID lockdowns. If you didn't agree with the lockdown, well, then we're going to weaponize the state against you, and we're going to infringe on your freedom, and we're going to fine you or throw you in jail. So there needs to be that balance of power in society, and gun ownership is one way to actually enforce that. And so gun ownership is not just about being a tough guy and, loving violence. It's actually about a deep respect for liberty, and also a way to keep the government in check. If your government runs roughshod over your rights, you need to have some ultimate mechanism for enforcing your rights. And proliferation of armed force is one of the ways that you do that.
Yeah, and it's not that we're saying that, the Canadians are freezing bank accounts, therefore we want Canadians to go and shoot up Ottawa. The kind of it's kind of an alternative history scenario that we think would have been the one that would have come about, which is that if that society was an armed society, the intrusion on liberty would not have happened in the first place. That is what an armed society engenders. It's a healthy understanding of the political class, of the relationship that it has towards its citizens. It is not a relationship of an armed father figure in the household that presides over its weak children and must protect them against all the bad things in the world. An armed society destroys that conception, kind of, and in the United States you see this to some degree, although less so, I would say, over the years, but still to some degree. There is this very tangible realization by political authorities that we are not parents, and that the people that we are assisting with governing society will kill us if we take it too far. And that, I think, is a healthy realization that a government should have. That realization does not exist in South Africa. It certainly doesn't exist in Europe. And I would just echo what you said, David. We would encourage a far greater uptake in firearm ownership. And I think this kind of does link to our last topic for today, which is also about crime fighting, but more about how is it that South Africa will solve this violent crime issue. We are constantly in the top 5 in homicide rates, in kind of sexual assault and rape. South Africa has been called the rape capital of the world. And we had that at the Free Market Foundation, the Section 12 initiative, which set out certain solutions to our violent crime problem. One of these was decentralization. Certainly not just decentralization to municipalities and provinces, but also to communities, kind of to security firms, to community initiatives, to give them a freer hand in dealing with the threats to their communities. Of course, still observing all the principles of due process and so forth, but just allowing a far more active community role to be taken. But the formal structures of government do still have to play a role. And we are fortunate in South Africa that competent municipal governments, the very few that there are, granted, do actually have an established legal right to establish a municipal police force, and that is in terms of the South African Police Act. Now, the South African Police Act says that a municipal police force may do three things. It may enforce traffic law, which is what we know Metro Police best for, or maybe worst for. That is why Metro Police are kind of very annoying to many South Africans, is because they spend an inordinate amount of time enforcing traffic laws. The other thing is to enforce bylaws. Another thing we know the Metro Police for is when they're packing up the go-go who's selling food on the roadside and kind of sending her away. That's the other thing that Metro Police are empowered to do. And the third thing, which is what Metro Police do the least of, but which is the most important, is to prevent crime. It's a power of general competence. Metro Police are allowed and, in fact, must prevent crime. Now, this week, as all of this was happening in Philippi, the mayor of Cape Town, Gordon Hill Lewis, wrote an op-ed in the Daily Maverick. And the title of that op-ed, let me share my screen here again, is "Just Two Words Can Make All the Difference in the Fight Against Crime in South Africa." This is a long op-ed, but effectively what he is saying is that this third category, kind of power of the Metro Police Force to prevent crime, is insufficient. Even though Metro Police don't actually do it, it's insufficient because it doesn't include the words "to investigate crime." And therefore, according to Mayor Hill Lewis, all the difference will be made if Parliament amends the South African Police Act to say that Metro Police may also investigate crime. Now, this was a very frustrating read to me because this is an issue that I think I've personally been dealing with for many years now, and I've been involved in task kind of working groups where the city of Cape Town was represented, where the Western Cape government was represented, where they were told that no, in fact, you can investigate crime. I don't want it to get too legal, technical here, or too into the jurisprudence of it, but to prevent crime, if let's say the South African Constitution said that there is one police service in South Africa, the South African Police Service, and it exists to prevent crime, and that's all the Constitution said, would we be crying and saying, "Oh my goodness, it doesn't say investigate crime. My goodness, now well, whatever will we do? We're not allowed to appoint detectives." No, of course we won't say that, because it is well established in our law, in law in general, all around the world, that any power given in a legislative or a statutory or a constitutional instrument includes everything around it that is necessary for that thing to happen. So if the law says you have the power to prevent crime, of course, that means you also have the power to investigate crime. Unfortunately, the DA, and I've had this conversation with others from the DA as well, it's not just Mayor Hill Lewis, thinks that no, the Metro Police can kind of stand on the roadside and like look at if they see a crime happening, they can intervene. But other than that, they're not allowed to take witness statements. They're not allowed to kind of test for ballistics. They're not allowed to execute search warrants, etc. And I found that to be a very odd self-imposed handicap. And I'll throw it over to you guys now for your thoughts on this, but it does seem to me to be contrived. To what end, I'm not sure. I'm wondering if the DA feels so unsure about its ability to, in fact, combat crime that it would rather want to say, no, no, the responsibility is Pretoria's. Any failure of criminal justice in Cape Town is not our fault, and now it's using this as kind of a pretext to guard against that. And the other possibility, which we've spoken to the DA about as well, is that there's a preoccupation with formalism, with asking for permission. There's just this almost deliberating fear that the DA and its governments have about conflict with the central government. Like after I posted about this on X, someone said no, but if they try and investigate, then SAPS and the courts and the NPA would have a problem with that. And it's like, well, okay, let them have a problem with that. Go and fight it out. Go to court and kind of get clarity on this matter. Don't just say, oh, we're not going to do anything because we might come up against political resistance, which is the posture that I see very much kind of embodied in this op-ed by Mayor Hill Lewis. Leigh-Ann, let's hear from you. You kind of, you're in the thick of of that situation. Do you think that the well-governed DA or any of its governments kind of are doing enough to fight crime?
They're absolutely not doing enough to fight crime. What I want to know is what stops them from employing more law enforcement officers. What exactly is it? Because I've heard various excuses from budget to whatever, but the reality is, and this is across South Africa, but particularly in the Western Cape as well, is that a lot of our SAPS members have, you're taking a constable who's just fresh out of the college and he's got 300 dockets on his desk. It is impossible. It is virtually impossible for anyone to investigate that number of cases and to do it well. So that is a huge problem. And probably one of the biggest issues is that we do have a lot of criminals just roaming the streets because investigations can't be done correctly. That would be my first question, and maybe you can answer that, Martin or David. What stops them? What actually prevents them from doing that, from employing more people to assist with these investigations? Is it that they are just saying, oh, well, the law prevents us and therefore, oopsie, sorry, we can't help you? Because currently also we have basically 2 cops per 1,000 residents, which isn't nearly enough. So we definitely need more boots on the ground. There are obviously loads of more issues, but I think that's quite an important place to start, because that is something that I feel they could do something about.
Yes. Yeah, so just briefly to answer that, I mean, I've come up against all these excuses and reasons for many years now, and one of them is budget. I would say that's probably the underlying big one that the DA and its government always falls back on, is to say that, well, even if we could do all these things, we only receive scraps from the central government, so therefore we can't do it, even if we were legally allowed to do it. The answer that I've had to that is nothing stops you from having volunteers. If you go to the US, for instance, they have these huge things called auxiliary divisions. Like these are volunteer police officers that don't get paid a cent. We used to have police reservists. The SAPS kind of abolished that. I don't think it's been formally abolished, but in practice, we don't really have police reservists anymore. I do not think anything stops a Metro Police Department from establishing an auxiliary division, which is trained, which is armed, maybe that arms itself, that maybe uses its own vehicles, but which does not get paid. So I don't think anything stops it from doing that. But you see, this is creative. And then when you start getting creative, then It goes away from budget to this thing about where they think they're not allowed to do it legally. They would say that, well, you see, the SAPS Act doesn't spell out that we are allowed to establish a auxiliary division, and therefore we are not allowed to do it. Which is, if you come up against that, you're actually dealing with someone who does not want to solve the problem. Unfortunately, you are dealing with someone who doesn't understand the role that they have to play as an elected or a representative of the people in that municipality, or as a official appointed by the state in that municipality. They have a responsibility, a democratic responsibility, but also like David alluded to earlier, a responsibility in terms of the social contract to protect people's liberty, to protect people's lives and properties. And they do not understand that. They defer entirely to formalisms, and that's a problem. That's a problem, because you don't see this issue with the ANC, for instance. They get very creative, and they don't always do it like out of malice. They understand that there's a problem, we're going to do something, we're the government, we're going to do something to solve this problem, and they usually have the complete wrong answers. But they do something, they think creatively. The Democratic Alliance has had trouble with this. So yeah, it's usually budget, or they're wedded to these formalisms. David, any thoughts from your side on whether municipalities could be doing more?
Yeah, so I think they could be doing more. I think they are doing some things in their defense. So the Law Enforcement Advancement Program, the LEAP program, is a joint initiative by the Western Cape government and the city of Cape Town to have more visible policing on the ground, which they've demonstrated that they've lowered violent crime in certain hotspots. And yeah, I think there's a really strong case to be made for visible policing, and boots on the ground, I think, is very important. But as you open this segment with, we actually need much more than just kind of enforcing things on the streets. We actually need investigative capacities. And earlier we were talking about Ian Cameron and the incident in Philippi. If you read some of the reports, you'll read that his gun has been taken away, and it's now being investigated by ballistics, which is actually very interesting because the ballistics capabilities at the SAPS in the Western Cape is notoriously incapacitated. So obviously our listeners will know that there's certain division of functions, constitutional mandates around designated powers. And so the Western Cape doesn't have any capability to deal with things like investigations of that nature. And so that means that a lot of the prolific gun violence that occurs on the Cape Flats essentially goes unprosecuted, because even if there's on its face case, a prima facie case against somebody, the ballistics evidence linked to that gun crime is often very weak and compromises the cases. So I think that there is a recognition and a desire for more power. But I think, Martin, your critique is that essentially those efforts are too timid, that basically the mistake that has been made by the Western Cape government and the city of Cape Town is that they're asking for permission for, I see that in some of the reporting, there's been a call for a joint task force to deal with gangsterism and, looking at illicit financial flows that's coming from some of this gang activity. And, that's probably well-intentioned. Oh, we want to work with SAPS to solve this problem together. But SAPS is in a state of crisis. I mean, just a few weeks ago on this podcast, we were talking about the revelations made by General Mkhwanazi. I mean, there are deep criminal networks within the SAPS that don't have an interest in solving some of these issues. And at what point, I mean, in 5 years' time, are you going to say, oh, okay, well, we're still waiting patiently for these issues to be resolved, and meanwhile, teenage girls are being shot on their way to school, like what happened in the Cape Flats in Samora Machel a couple of months ago. A 15-year-old girl was killed on her way to school. For that young woman, her whole life has been robbed of her. Her whole future has been essentially taken away by a stray bullet. So I think it is, we're sympathetic with the constraints, but I think the time is now ripe for actually pushing back and saying, well, we have a democratic mandate from our constituents. We're not going to wait for national government to get its act together. We're going to start acting and then acquire some of these powers. Don't wait for permission. If you have an objection to what we're doing, national government, take us to court and we'll fight it out there. And Martin, in our roadshow last year, you often would mention this doctrine of necessity. And the example you gave was, if you're walking in the parking lot and you have a brick in your hand, a brick, a very violent weapon, and you smash somebody's windscreen, you would rightly be prosecuted for that. That's destruction of property. But a slightly different scenario, if you're walking through the hot parking lot on a summer's day and you see that there's a baby in the car seat in the back of a sweltering hot car, crying desperately, about to expire from the heat, then you actually have a moral duty to pick up a brick and break that window and rescue the child. And yes, you might have destroyed property in the process, but you were acting according to the extreme need of that situation, doctrine of necessity. So, I think you could apply that same principle to what's happening in the Western Cape. Everybody loves that the roads are well maintained and the garbage is collected on time. But those are kind of more marginal issues compared to matters of basic life and security that are affecting many communities in the Western Cape. And I think if you want to ward off the critics like Brett Heron, who say that the DA is not doing enough to deal with violent crime in underdeveloped areas, then you need to start acquiring some of these powers for yourself.
Yeah, and it's not just a matter of start with the most difficult and kind of have yourself tied up there. There's low hanging fruit, and like as I mentioned, the SAPS Act already gives Metro Police that right to prevent crime. So by kind of the admission already of Metro Police in well-governed municipalities, and their mayors like Gordon Hill Lewis, they are allowed, in fact, they do have the power of arrest, etc., but not investigation. Apparently, I disagree. But that means already that Cape Town could, for instance, put Metro Police officers on every corner in Mitchell's Plain. They could do that. And then my column next week, I'm basically going to argue that it must resemble a military occupation, which I think the people of the Cape Flats would be ecstatically happy about, because it is in fact necessary to have that overwhelming level of visible policing there, and it need not cost the amounts of money that I think the Western Cape government and the local government there have in mind. You can, in fact, use volunteers. You can, in fact, crowdsource. I'm sure there's many businesses in the Western Cape who are very willing and would be very keen to have under their CSI in a given year in their annual report that they have donated a kind of a year's worth of police training to the Cape Town Metro Police. That is something that I think would be uncovered if, in fact, one were to go look for it. You don't have, not everything has to be funded by taxes. So there are solutions within legal grasp, and then there are solutions within maybe gray legal grasp, which we would say you have to reach for anyway and see where the chips fall. But you run up against a problem if there is nothing but a refusal, and I've said this in many other contexts as well when dealing with the DA. And of course, I'm picking on the DA because there's only two governments in South Africa. There's places governed by the ANC, and there's places governed by the DA. The IFP is kind of a marginal force in this, but this is why I'm picking on the DA. But there is a constant refrain from the DA where they constantly look for excuses to not do the thing. Whatever the thing is, they will always be kind of looking for excuses to not do the thing. And I addressed a big crowd of DA municipal councillors recently, and I said, listen, There is always a good reason to do something, and there is also a good reason to not do the thing. You have the good reason to not do the thing well covered. You don't have to invest any more time in that. Spend a little bit of time investigating the good reason to in fact do it, and see how you feel after you've invested that mental effort into that, because that is what principles are. If you have a principle, it must weigh heavier on the good reason to do the thing, if that kind of aligns with the principle. So just spend more time not saying no. Just try it out for size. Say yes. Just try it for a change and see what happens. And that's been my advice. And I think we might be surprised at how many additional problems we can solve. But yeah, I think that probably exhausts these topics. I think I'm going to give you both a opportunity for a last word to comment on uh, Rambo Pitritif and crime enforcement in the Western Cape and Cape Town, and then I'll close us off. Leigh-Ann, let's start with you.
One thing that I will say, I was very happy to see, is that the overwhelming majority of South Africans across all platforms supported Ian 100% and said he was well within his rights to defend his life. There were quite a lot of comments, people who said they had lost friends or they themselves had been attacked with rocks on the N2 or bricks or whatever the case. So South Africans still do believe in the right to defend yourself. So that was very good to see. And yeah, that's basically it from our side.
I would just end off by re-emphasizing this point of taking responsibility. And it touches on both of these topics. The one is we need more responsible gun ownership in South Africa, a diffusion of armed force to make up for the misgovernance of our country and the security cluster. I think this could be a really important nationwide, universal talking point. People, I think, are fed up of crime, and they want to see some cogent solutions. So, yeah, take a responsibility by being a gun owner and protecting your family, your community, and your neighborhood, and then also to our friends at the DA in the Western Cape, take responsibility by pushing the envelope of your authority. You may be surprised by what you can achieve, and there's no guarantee of success, and you might get some pretty significant pushback, but it's worth at least making the attempt and seeing how far you can push that, because you have a duty to your constituents to do that.
Absolutely. Well said. Thank you. Thank you to you both. So that brings us to the end of this episode of The Rational Standard. We hope you enjoyed, and please remember to like this video if you did. Please subscribe to The Rational Standard channel, and then do share it across all your various platforms. Rational Standard is a Substack platform where we also have a lot of written content, so please do visit rationalstandard.com or .co.za and restack that on Substack, and also share that content on your other platforms. I think, yeah, I think that's covered, and hopefully next week we'll have a little bit more closure on some of these stories. I hope the ridiculousness of the response around Ian Cameron defending himself would have become a little bit more muted, but we will let you know if anything new has happened, or whether suddenly there's been a come to God moment in the ANC and they've now devolved policing powers to the Western Cape, formally, as Gordon Hill Lewis so desperately wants them to do. I'm not going to hold my breath on that. But thank you for joining us, and we will catch you again next week. Cheerio.